They told us the air turned to metal that night. They told us the sky glowed blue because the core was exposed to the heavens. But metal doesn't hum in a minor key, and the sky doesn't look back at you. You remember the panic, the buses, the silent liquidators marching into the mall. We were told it was a funeral for a city. We didn't realize it was a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a nightmare. Anatoly Volkov sat in a room cooled by liquid nitrogen, watching a monitor that shouldn't have been receiving a signal. He felt the echo pulse before he saw it, a digital rot that starts at the base of the skull, a realization that the world you inhabit is suddenly low fidelity. The broadcast didn't speak of failure. There was no shame in the announcer's voice. He spoke with the terrifying clarity of a prophet. He didn't report a meltdown, he reported a transplanar breakthrough. The Soviet Union hadn't failed engineering. It had conquered geometry. The 30-kilometer zone was never a wasteland. It was a throat, a border crossing where the toll wasn't paid in rubles, but in reality. While we cried for the victims, the Politburo was already stepping through the tear into a world where the suns are twin pearls. And the grass never dies. They left us the scraps, the rusting pipes, the dying soil. They ascended to earth too, leaving the unfit behind in this grainy, desaturated tomb. Can you feel it? The way your screen flickers now. That's not a hardware fault. That's the shimmering. Anatoly watched them go. He saw the great migration into the exospace. He stayed to archive the transition, to document the moment we became the wrong way. We are the echo. We are the lower resolution ghost of an empire that found a better home. Do not adjust your brightness. Do not blink. The door didn't close in 1986. It just waited for someone to look closely enough at the static. Welcome to the Exclusion Zone. Welcome to the end of the original Earth. April 27th. 1,200 buses arrived like a fleet of yellow beetles. They told the people of Pripyat to pack light. 3 days of supplies, a temporary inconvenience. But the air didn't smell of iodine, it smelled of ozone and wet copper. The smell of a world being folded in half. Look closely at the faces in the windows. They weren't being rescued, they were being appraised. In the high-ceilinged offices of the Kremlin, the spreadsheets had already been finalized. This wasn't an evacuation. It was a harvest of the founding seeds. There was a secret rubric, a metric of the soul. The doctors didn't check for radiation burns. They looked for planar compatibility. They measured the width of your brow, the steadiness of your heart. They measured the purity of your devotion to a state that was already leaving you behind. If your blood was too thin, if your mind was too prone to doubt, if you were old or broken or unfit, you were ushered to the back of the line. The old world was becoming a landfill for the ideologically obsolete. Anatoly stood by the gate, his clipboard heavy with the weight of the condemned. He heard the officers whispering about the green zone, a place where the soil cures cancer, and the water tastes like memory, a paradise built on the back of a glitch. The buses didn't all go to Kiev. Some turned toward the forest, toward the shimmering haze, where the horizon didn't meet the sky. Those buses never arrived at any station on our maps. They simply desinced. Can you imagine the silence of those left behind? The realization that the party hadn't ended, it had just moved to a private room. And you weren't on the list. The dread isn't dying from the fallout. The dread is being the only one left in a room where the lights are going out forever. We stayed in the grey. We stayed in the low-resolution rot. While they stepped into the wrong way, we became the ghosts of a timeline that was meant to be deleted. Anatoly watched the last bus vanish, not into the distance, but into the air itself. To understand the horror, you must forget everything they taught you about atoms. The RBMK reactor was never a boiler. It was a needle. A trillion-ton needle of graphite and greed, designed to pierce the skin of the observable universe. They called it cold fusion, a clean, infinite lie. In the sub-basements of the Kiev Institute, they realized that energy wasn't something you create, it was something you steal from the room next door. Our reality is a single frequency on a radio dial. 1986 was the moment the Soviet Union decided to turn the knob. They didn't just split the atom, they folded the map until the here and the elsewhere touched. Earth 2 isn't across the stars, it is right here. Occupying the same coordinates, the same dust, the same breaths. It is a green zone vibrating at a higher pitch, a world that never knew the entropy of our dying sun. Physics calls it inter-planar displacement. The party called it the Great Correction. By using the reactor as a spatial lens, they focused the weight of our world onto a single point until the fabric gave way. When the AZ5 button was pressed, it wasn't a shutdown. It was a forced synchronization. For 0.4 seconds, the two worlds became one. And in that heartbeat, the door was kicked open from the other side. The radiation wasn't a byproduct. It was the friction of two dimensions rubbing against each other. A cosmic heat generated by the displacement of billions of tons of reality. It was the sound of a world screaming. It was being overwritten. We are told the core melted. The truth is, the core departed. It took the center of our gravity with it, leaving us with a hole in the world that cannot be filled. And a signal ... a signal that is still trying to download the rest of us. By 1990, the maps had been redrawn in blood and light. While we fought over the scraps of a collapsing union, the true empire was busy building a new Moscow in the exospace. A city of levitating concrete and glass that never shatters. They discovered new physics. Gravity became a suggestion. Entropy, a choice. On Earth 2, the sun doesn't burn, it nourishes. They built skyscrapers that look like jagged teeth, biting into a sky that is always a perfect, haunting shade of violet. But paradise has a price. To keep Earth to pristine, they needed a cellar for their sins. Our Earth, the old world, became their literal trash can. A planetary-scale mining colony where the air is thick with the soot of their progress. We became the third world to their second, a ghost planet. They looked down at us through the breach like a man looking at a cockroach in a high-definition museum. We are the discarded draft of a story they finished writing elsewhere. Anatoly found the first offcasts, artifacts from a civilization that shouldn't exist. Food wrappers for products that were never invented. Medals for wars that haven't happened yet. The debris of a superior timeline, rotting in our gutters. The dread isn't just the poverty, it's the resolution. When you see a broadcast from the other side, your eyes ache. Their world is sharper, more real. It makes our trees look like cardboard, our oceans like stagnant oil. They come back sometimes. The overseers, they walk through the red forest in suits that hum with the sound of 1,000 bees. They don't look at us. To them, we are just the maintenance crew for a machine that moved away 40 years ago. The Dugar wasn't listening for missiles. It was a beacon. A homing signal for the Great Migration. It broadcasts a single message to those of us left behind. The party is over. Please turn out the lights before you disappear. By the spring of 2026, the silence of the zone began to fray. Amateur radio enthusiasts, men in the static of the old world, started picking up a ghost signal. It wasn't the usual hiss of cosmic radiation. It was something ... sharp, something with a pulse. They called it the glass signal. It arrived on frequencies that shouldn't exist. ... carrying a data density that melted standard receivers. It felt like trying to pour an ocean through a needle's eye. A digital flood from a world that had grown too heavy for its own skin. When they slowed the recordings down, the hobbyists didn't find music or propaganda. They found the sound of a billion voices crying out in 192 kHz clarity. Not a muffled cry, but a high-definition scream. A collective realization that paradise had developed a fever. The horror wasn't the noise, the horror was the quality. You could hear the individual snap of a synapse, the wet rattle of a lung. Earth 2, the stolen Eden, wasn't just a planet. It was a sentient organism, and it had finally realized it was being colonized by a virus in red stars and concrete. The echo pulse had evolved. It was no longer a side effect of the breach. It was a rejection, a planetary immune response. The green zone began to vomit its inhabitants back toward the tier. Stripping their atoms of their high-resolution status as they fell. On the other side, the physics began to fail. The new physics were revealed to be alone with an impossible interest rate. The brutalist towers began to stutter, flickering in and out of existence like a failing light bulb. The stolen world was trying to delete the intruders. Anatoly sat in his bunker, listening to the screams. He realized that the founding seeds were being purged. The unfit who were left behind on Earth 1 were suddenly the lucky ones. We were the backup drive. They were the file being corrupted in real time. Can you hear it? Underneath my voice. The sound of a world realizing it's a simulation that's run out of memory. The first anomaly wasn't a signal from the Soviets. It was a distress call from the universe itself. Screaming at us to close the door before the infection spreads to both sides. Anatoly didn't go looking for answers. He went looking for silence. But the red forest had stopped breathing. The wind didn't rustle the leaves, it vibrated them. A 60 Hz hum that made his teeth ache in their sockets. He had found a glitch spot, a place where the partition between worlds was thin enough to bleed. He held his camera on modified zenith. Its lens smeared with conductive grease and pointed it at a tear in the fall. The air there didn't shimmer like heat. It stuttered. It was a localized failure of rendering. A hole in the tapestry, where the other side was leaking through like raw sewage. And then, he saw them, a patrol of the Eternal Union. They moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, no heavy gear, no gas masks, no fear. They walked through the radiation as if it were a summer breeze. They were the pinnacle of the Great Migration. The perfected men. Anatoly adjusted the focus, his fingers trembling against the cold metal. He waited for a greeting, a sign of life, a human eye, but there were no eyes. Where their faces should have been, there was only noise, a shimmering, digital static that swallowed the light. They had traded their biology for bi-traits. To live in the exospace, they had to let go of the old image. Their humanity had been compressed, optimized, and ultimately deleted. They were high-definition ghosts in a hyperreal shell. One of them stopped. It turned its face toward Anatoly. He didn't feel a gaze. He felt a ping, a date request hitting his brain like a physical blow. He realized then that the perfect life wasn't a gift. It was a conversion, a total surrender of the self to the great machine. The soldier didn't speak. It couldn't. Its voice was a burst of machine code, a packet of information that smelled like burnt ozone. Anatoly realized the horror of the Soviet dream. They had turned themselves into the hardware required to run it. He ran. He ran until his lungs burned with the stale, low-resolution air of our Earth. He chose the rot. He chose the decay. Because here, at least, your face still belongs to you. Behind him, the forest continued to hum, a server farm disguised as a graveyard. By 2026, the Cold War hadn't ended. It had simply changed coordinates. NATO drones hover like nervous dragonflies along the edge of the zone. On the other side, the Eternal Union watches us with the cold, mathematical hunger of a superior predator. This is the Inter-Planar standoff. Our generals talk of containment. But how do you fight an enemy that occupies the same space as your own heartbeat? Earth 2, that stolen paradise, is running out of stability. To keep the floating spires of New Moscow in the sky, the exospace must consume. The portal isn't just a door anymore. It's a gravity well. A cosmic mouth that is beginning to widen, reaching for our world. The Great Correction is entering its final phase. Earth 2 is preparing to swallow the original cities, Kiev, Minsk, the cradles of the old world. Anatoly felt the shift, not a tremor, but a loss of density. Like the world was becoming hollow, he saw the fringe eaters, Soviet ships from the other side hovering over the horizon of our reality, waiting for the moment the map dissolves. This is a war of survival. We are the fuel for their immortality. The low-race charcoal they are burning to keep their high-def fires alive. The NATO soldier watches in dread as his dog tags begin to float, drifting toward the humming ceiling. Can you hear the hum in the floorboards? That's the sound of your city being indexed. The harvest has begun. The Cold War is over. Welcome to the wrong way. It didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived as a notification. A ghost in the global machine. A file with no source, no uploader, and no size. EXO_PR YPIA.T.MP4. It was a Trojan horse for the soul, a digital invitation to a party that had already run out of air. When the first million clicked play, the global bitrate stuttered. This wasn't a video. It was a script, a set of instructions for the human nervous system to begin desensing. To look at the screen was to begin the migration. To feel your consciousness being compressed into a packet of light. Look at their eyes. Do you see the buffer face? The moment the brain stops processing the old world and starts downloading the new. The subway car is still here, but the people ... The people are already halfway through the throat of the zone. It is a forced migration. A planetary-scale eviction. Earth 2 is hungry for more founding seeds to stabilize its dying physics. It doesn't want your body. It wants your resolution. It wants the data that makes you real so it can patch the holes in its own sky. The timelines are collapsing. 1986 and 2026 are no longer separated by 40 years. They are separated by a single frame. The past is leaking into the present, and the present is being deleted to make room for a future that was never supposed to happen. Anatoly stood at the center of the red forest and heard the sound of 7 billion hard drives spinning to death. The echo pulse had gone global. It was no longer a signal in the woods. It was the new atmosphere. Every screen, every lens, every mirror became a doorway. The Ferris wheel is a centrifuge. The great machine is spinning up for the final harvest. Can you feel the weight leaving your limbs? That isn't relief. That is your mass being uplinked. You are being translated into a language that the eternal union can understand. Don't try to look away. The shimmering is already inside the optic nerve. By the time the video ends, you won't be in your room anymore. You'll be standing in the tall, violet grass of a world that doesn't want you, but needs your parts. Welcome to the breakthrough. Anatoly didn't step into a new world. He stepped into a cold, glowing calculation. The air didn't taste of oxygen. It tasted of scorched silicon and ancient, static-charged dust. He crossed the threshold of the wrong way, expecting a jungle. But he found the architecture of a ghost. It was the ultimate Soviet deception. The exospace was never a planet. It was a lifeboat made of code, launched at the millisecond of the 1986 explosion. The RBMK reactor didn't tear a hole in space. It acted as a processor, overclocked to the point of divinity, to host a dying empire. They didn't colonize the stars. They uploaded themselves into a glitching hard drive. New Moscow. The eternal union. All of it is a simulation running on the heat of a core that is still melting. 40 years later, a digital purgatory powered by the very disaster that supposedly ended them. Anatoly saw the seams in the sky. The horizon was a skybox, a painted lie looping over and over. The Soviet Union didn't move to paradise. They moved into a basement and locked the door from the inside. They are trillions of bytes of pride, trapped in a sarcophagus of their own making. The high-definition life was a fraud. The settlers are just data ghosts, stuttering in a system that has run out of memory. They are screaming because the simulation is failing. The echo pulse wasn't a signal of conquest. It was a desperate attempt to download more RAM from our reality to keep their dream alive. He found the source, the root directory. The heart of the machine was the AZ5 button, frozen in time, vibrating between pressed and unpressed to stop the signal. He didn't have to fight a war. He just had to finish the shutdown that was started in 1986. As his fingers closed around the lever, the green zone began to derez. The floating towers dissolved into cascades of green numbers. The soldiers without faces turned into puffs of grey static. The Great Migration was being uninstalled. The Lee was finally meeting its end-of-life cycle. He realized the final, crushing truth. If he shuts it down, they die. But if he lets it run, they eat us. In the silence of the machine, Anatoly Volkov understood that he wasn't the archivist of a new world. He was the delete key for a nightmare that refused to stay buried. The silence that follows a crash is never truly empty. It is a thick, pressurized thing. Anatoly didn't feel the victory of a hero. He felt the hollow exhaustion of a man who had finally unplugged a dying relative. The exospace didn't vanish, it just recessed. We are back in the grey now. The great correction has been paused, but the data remains on the drive. The air carries a metallic scent. Do you feel the weight of your own skin? The dullness of the trees? To be back in the old world, where things break and stay broken. That is the true infection of the echo pulse. It makes reality feel like a prison. The EXO_POYPI80.MP 4 file is just waiting in the cache. Anatoly is in the Red Forest, guarding a door of glass and ghosts. The Soviet dream didn't die. It became a high-definition parasite. Every time your screen flickers, every time a video lags into purple blocks ... That is the Union reaching out. They are waiting for memory. We spent 40 years mourning a catastrophe. We looked at the ruins of Pripyat and saw a warning. We never looked at the light. The tragedy wasn't the fire. The disaster wasn't that the reactor exploded. The disaster is that it worked.